Hello everyone! Welcome back to the African Lens 7421, your go-to place for deep dives into African politics and public affairs. I bet you didn't know how the events of 1979 in Iran would send shockwaves across the globe and forever change the course of a nation. 1979 marked a dramatic turning point in Iran's history, a year that would forever alter the nation's destiny and reverberate across the world. For decades, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi ruled Iran with the strong backing of Western powers, especially the United States and Britain. He launched the White Revolution, a sweeping series of reforms aimed at modernizing the country, expanding education, redistributing land, and granting women the right to vote. These changes brought visible progress, especially in cities, and projected an image of a modern, forward-looking Iran. Tehran, the capital, thrived with new industries, busy markets, and a growing middle class. Yet beneath the surface, resentment simmered among many Iranians. The Shah's autocratic rule, enforced by the feared secret police known as Savak, crushed dissent and silenced critics. Many saw his reforms as forced westernization, eroding traditional values and religious life. Political freedoms were limited, and those who spoke out risked imprisonment or worse. Oil wealth flowed into the country, but it mostly enriched a small elite close to the Shah, while poverty and inequality persisted for millions. The gap between rich and poor grew ever wider, fueling anger and frustration. Into this climate of unrest stepped Ayatollah Khomeini, a charismatic cleric exiled for his outspoken opposition. From abroad, he sent cassette tapes filled with fiery sermons, calling for social justice, independence from foreign influence, and a return to Islamic values. His words spread secretly from mosque to marketplace, inspiring hope and defiance. Khomeini's message resonated deeply, uniting a diverse opposition, students, workers, religious leaders, and secular activists, against the Shah's regime. By late 1978, Iran was gripped by massive strikes and protests. Factories shut down, shops closed, and millions took to the streets, paralyzing the country and leaving the Shah's government teetering on the brink of collapse. In January 1979, with his authority shattered and no path forward, the Shah fled Iran, leaving behind a nation in turmoil and uncertainty. Just 2 weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile to a hero's welcome. Millions flooded the streets to greet him, their hopes pinned on his promise of change. For many, Khomeini was a savior, the leader who would end 2,500 years of monarchy and restore dignity and justice to Iran. But this was more than just a change of ruler. It was the birth of a new, uncertain era, one that would reshape Iran's identity, politics, and its place in the world. The revolution had begun, and from that moment on, Iran and the Middle East would never be the same. With the Shah gone, Khomeini and his clerics quickly consolidated power. A 1979 referendum abolished the monarchy, creating an Islamic Republic, a blend of elected institutions and ultimate clerical authority. The supreme leader, first held by Khomeini, now had final say over all matters. Soon, tensions with the US exploded. When America admitted the exiled Shah, radical students stormed the US embassy, taking 52 hostages. Khomeini endorsed the act, calling the embassy a den of spies. The crisis lasted 444 days, poisoning US-Iran relations and isolating Iran. For hardliners, it was a victory. For moderates, a silencing blow. The Islamic Republic's identity was forged in confrontation and defiance. The new regime launched a sweeping cultural revolution. Universities were shuttered, their gates locked, and campuses emptied as the government sought to purge Western and secular influences from education. Textbooks were rewritten to reflect Islamic ideology, and the hijab became mandatory for all women, symbolizing the new order. Dissent was ruthlessly crushed, with intellectuals, students, and political opponents silenced or exiled. The atmosphere was tense, as fear and uncertainty gripped the nation. In 1980, as Iran was still reeling from revolutionary upheaval, Iraq's Saddam Hussein invaded, hoping to exploit the chaos and seize territory. The sudden attack caught Iran off guard, plunging the country into a brutal conflict. Instead of collapsing, the war unexpectedly unified Iranians across social and political divides. Nationalism surged and religious fervor intensified as people rallied behind the new Islamic Republic, determined to defend their homeland at any cost. The Iran-Iraq War dragged on for 8 long years, devastating cities and villages, and costing hundreds of thousands of lives on both sides. The conflict left deep scars, both physical and psychological, on the Iranian people. During the war, Iran's Revolutionary Guard grew immensely powerful, transforming society into a militarized state. Internal dissent was stamped out with increasing brutality as the regime tightened its grip and prioritized loyalty above all else. By 1988, both Iran and Iraq were exhausted, their economies shattered, and populations weary. Khomeini reluctantly accepted a UN ceasefire, famously describing the decision as drinking poison, a bitter end to a costly war. The war ended in stalemate, but it cemented the cleric's grip on power. The Islamic Republic emerged more authoritarian, with the clergy and military firmly in control of the state. Khomeini's authority remained absolute until his death in 1989, his image and words shaping every aspect of Iranian life. His passing marked the end of an era, but his legacy endured. Iran emerged from the war isolated on the world stage, battered economically and socially, and under the watchful eyes of a tightly controlled security apparatus. The revolution had survived its greatest test, but the cost was immense. Freedom was sacrificed, and the wounds of war would linger for generations. Khomeini's death in 1989 left a leadership void. The Assembly of Experts amended the rules and chose Ali Khamenei, a pragmatic but less charismatic figure, as supreme leader. Khamenei consolidated power over the military, judiciary, and economy, becoming Iran's ultimate authority. Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani became president, focusing on post-war reconstruction and cautious economic reforms. He rebuilt infrastructure and sought better ties with neighbors, but growth brought inflation and inequality. Benefits flowed to the well-connected, frustrating many. Social restrictions remained, fueling discontent among the young. Rafsanjani's era set the stage for a new struggle: reform versus hardline control. The battle for Iran's future was just beginning. The system's contradictions were coming to the surface. In 1997, reformist Mohammad Khatami achieved a stunning landslide victory, capturing the imagination of millions of Iranians. He campaigned on promises of greater openness, dialogue with the world, and a more inclusive civil society. For many, his election marked a turning point, a moment when hope for real change seemed within reach. Young people and women, long yearning for more personal and social freedoms, were the driving force behind Khatami's win. Their energy and optimism filled the streets as they envisioned a future with fewer restrictions and more opportunities. The period that followed, often called the Tehran Spring, brought a wave of optimism. Social controls loosened, the press flourished with new publications, and public debates about democracy and reform became common in parks and cafes. For a brief time, it felt as if a new era was dawning, but this newfound openness was met with fierce resistance. Hardliners in the judiciary and security forces moved quickly to block reforms, shutting down dozens of newspapers, arresting activists, and sending a clear warning to those pushing for change. The supreme leader's unelected power ultimately trumped the popular mandate, reminding everyone that real authority remained firmly in the hands of the conservative establishment. As hopes for reform faded, disillusionment spread among those who had once believed in the promise of gradual change. Many young Iranians began to question whether meaningful transformation was possible at all. In 2005, hardliner Mahmoud Ahmadinejad rose to power, vowing a return to revolutionary values and a tougher stance against the West. His presidency signaled a dramatic reversal of the reformist momentum. When Ahmadinejad's 2009 re-election was widely seen as fraudulent, it ignited the Green Movement, an unprecedented wave of mass protests demanding accountability and reform. The government responded with a harsh crackdown, using force to silence dissent. The regime's message was unmistakable. Reform would not come from within the system. Any challenge to the status quo would be met with repression. The dream of gradual, peaceful change was shattered, leaving many Iranians feeling betrayed and hopeless in the aftermath. Iran's political divide had deepened, setting the stage for years of tension and uncertainty about the country's future. In the 2000s, Iran's nuclear program became the world's focus. Western suspicions led to crippling UN sanctions, devastating Iran's economy. Inflation soared, the currency collapsed, and daily life grew harder. In 2013, moderate Hassan Rouhani's election opened the door to diplomacy. The 2015 nuclear deal, JCPOA, limited Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. For a moment, hope returned. But in 2018, President Trump withdrew the US from the deal, reimposing harsh sanctions. Iran responded by ramping up its nuclear program. Tensions soared, trust evaporated, and the nuclear crisis returned. The cycle of confrontation resumed. Ordinary Iranians bore the brunt of the fallout. Renewed US sanctions plunged Iran into economic crisis. Inflation and unemployment soared, fueling widespread anger. Protests erupted in 2019 after fuel price hikes, spreading to over 100 cities. The government responded with lethal force and internet blackouts, killing hundreds. In 2022, the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody ignited the Woman Life Freedom movement. Women led unprecedented protests, challenging the regime's legitimacy. The crackdown was brutal, but the movement persisted for months. The regime blamed foreign enemies, refusing concessions. Though protests subsided, the desire for change remained. Iran's youth had sent a powerful message. The status quo was no longer acceptable. By 2025, hardliners dominate Iran's politics. Reformists are sidelined. The IRGC controls not just the military, but vast economic and political power. Elections are tightly managed, with moderates disqualified and turnout at record lows. Internationally, Iran faces Western sanctions and nuclear standoffs, but deepens ties with China and Russia. The look to the East policy offers lifelines, but increases dependency. Domestically, economic hardship and repression fuel simmering unrest. The regime relies on security forces to maintain order, but public anger is palpable. The grievances behind recent protests remain unresolved. Iran's leadership faces a volatile mix of internal pressure and external threats. The future is more uncertain than ever. The legacy of the 1979 revolution is deeply contested. Supporters see resilience, independence, and regional influence. Critics see broken promises, repression, and isolation. The regime has survived war, sanctions, and uprisings, adapting to each challenge. Power has shifted to unelected bodies like the IRGC and Guardian Council. The looming succession of the aging supreme leader could reshape Iran's future. Economic crisis and a restless young population demand change. Externally, Iran remains locked in confrontation with the West. The struggle between entrenched power and a new generation continues. Iran's next chapter remains unwritten. If you want more videos like this, subscribe to our channel The African Lens 7421, give us a thumbs up, and hit the notification button.